What's up? It's Andy Grammer with Jag.
Hi, this is Carly Rae Jepsen, and you're listening to Jag.
Hey everybody, it's Joe Jonas hanging with Jag.
This is Heather Knox with the hottest Jag I've ever seen.
Ryan Seacrest with Jag.
It's B.O.B. checking in with my homie Jag. So much swag with my homie Jag.
It's the Jag Show Podcast.
Welcome into the last 5-minute Friday of May. It is almost June, but does it feel like it? Do we even know anymore? We're kind of in this endless time-space vacuum at this point. I want to start today with something I've talked about before, which is not sweating the downloads. It's something that I've preached, but not necessarily practiced. Because like all of you, I find myself checking my downloads on the show. By the way, thank you for listening. But what I always tell clients is think of podcasting as a marketing tool, as a branding tool. Think of it as something that's going to be good for your business. Worry about that more than the downloads. Well, it is time to practice what I preach. If you're friends with me on Facebook or you follow my Jag in Detroit podcast Facebook page or Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn or any other social media, you know that I post a lot of my podcast content. My Jag Show podcast, I've also been posting Michigan Motors Forward, my partnership with Tanner Friedman Strategic Communications. And last week, I heard from somebody I'm Facebook friends with that I worked with in another market almost a decade ago, and he said, hey, I'm working for a PR firm now. I have a client that's interested in doing a podcast. Can I connect you guys? And I realized he had just seen all my posts about podcasts. Somebody I hadn't talked to in almost a decade. So in a way, I kind of proved my own theory. Somebody saw my posts about podcasts, turned into a branding tool, and then it turned into a lead and a meeting with a potential client. So use your podcast as a tool. Don't freak out about your download numbers. Also want to hit you with a couple quick updates on some big podcasting stories this week. I told you last week about the Joe Rogan story. You've probably seen it everywhere. Got a $100 million deal to go to Spotify exclusively. Interview with a reporter from the New York Times who's actually a good friend with him. He says he feels gross. That amount of money, he says, feels, quote, gross with the amount of people that are out of work right now. And of course, some backlash to the Spotify deal that Joe Rogan had is people saying, oh, Spotify's not this open ecosystem anymore. What are we going to do? Well, James Cridlin, who is one of the brightest minds in all of podcasting, writes a column called Pod News and actually writes for Medium.com as well. He contends that podcasting never really was an open ecosystem to begin with. Just look at what Apple has done with the space. That said, Spotify is hot on their tail. Amazon also getting into podcasts. Not sure if Audible is going to figure into this equation at all, but Amazon Music is going to start having podcasts, which would lead to the assumption that when you ask Alexa to play a podcast, the default playback is going to be Amazon Music as opposed to what it is now, which is TuneIn Radio. Is your podcast on Google? You may not know whether or not it is. Google finds you as opposed to you submitting to Google, but you can take control of your Google Podcast stats as Google Podcasting continues to grow. You can check out Google Podcast Manager, take ownership of your show, and look at any stats from anybody who's listening in Google Podcasts. Yes, they are some, and it is growing. The Call Her Daddy drama, Call Her Daddy versus Barstool Sports, and that whole dust-up, you can see the whole story in last week's 5-Minute Friday. The end result seems to be that host Alex Cooper is back. Her co-host Sofia Franklin is not. She wanted too much money, and it sounds like she got some pretty bad business advice from her alleged boyfriend at HBO Sports. At the opposite end of the sex appeal spectrum, 86-year-old Larry King is getting a podcast. It's called The Millionth Question. Detroit, hello. And finally, I crunched some numbers this week. Just a big thank you to anybody who has consulted with me or employed me or worked with me on their podcast. In a little less than 2 years, Jag in Detroit podcast has helped clients and podcasters in 18 different states. So a heartfelt thanks from me to you, and if I can help you with your podcast, you'll hear my contact info in just a moment. Later.
Thanks for listening to the Jag Show Podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe in Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are published every Tuesday and Friday morning. For help with your podcast, find Jag on social media at Jag in Detroit or on the web at jagindetroit.com.